Today, I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence. Now, if I asked you what makes a good leader, here is a list of things that people typically come up with. People talk about the leader being inspirational. They pushed you to do your best. They had you back. They listened. They were supportive, honest, and consistent. And if you look at that list, there are a lot of things there that involve emotions. So inspirational, they supported you, they had you back, they listened. And those kind of things are all relevant to emotional intelligence. Emotions are involved in being a good leader. So what actually is emotional intelligence? I've got a list of definitions here. Different people define it differently. You could say that emotional intelligence is a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationship, cope with challenges and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. Or you could say it's the ability to monitor one's own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different emotions and label them appropriately, and to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. You could say that it's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Or you could say it's simply the ability to understand and manage emotional encounters. Now, personally, I think the Goleman definition is the most accessible one. So the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others. Now, individuals who score highly on emotional intelligence are better to handle everyday stress. They have a greater number of meaningful close relationships. They're more socially competent in general. They have high levels of well-being, and they show better psychological function. And if you look at research that has examined emotional intelligence versus IQ, people have found that IQ can predict on average about 6% of an individual's success in a given job, whereas emotional intelligence is maybe responsible for about a third of that. And when looking at star performers in an organization, emotional intelligence typically accounts for 85% of that performance, and IQ or technical skills only for 15%. And you can see how that's important, because most of us in the workplace, we focus on our technical skills, but actually it's emotional intelligence that accounts for an awful lot when it comes to being a star performer. And in a survey of multimillionaires, the top 5 factors listed as most responsible for their success were all reflections of emotional intelligence. Now, the good thing is that emotional intelligence is something that you can develop and that it improves. It increases with age anyway. So even if you do very little over time, emotional intelligence is going to improve. You can work at it and you can develop it. And more isn't always better. The balance of the components matters. And I'm going to come on to that back in a minute. And I think looking at emotional intelligence, it's useful to look at it as a development tool. So examining emotional intelligence is not about assessing or judging, because it doesn't really matter where you are. And remember also, it's the balance that's important rather than just how much you have. But if you look at emotional intelligence as a way that you can develop yourself as a leader. Now, the model that I quite like to talk about emotional intelligence in detail is the EQI 2.0 model. I like the Goleman definition, so that's about recognizing, understanding, and managing your own emotions and the emotions of others. So that's a very easy definition that captures things, makes it easy to comprehend. But I really like the EQI definition because this has 15 subscales. And I like it because it identifies very specific aspects of it. If I said to you, managing your own emotions, what does that mean? So the Goleman definition, understand, recognize, understand, and manage, that's useful, but exactly what that means, it's not quite as granular. Whereas the EQI definition I like because it's much more granular. And I'm going to talk you through the 15 subscales so that you know what the 15 components of emotional intelligence according to this definition would be. So the first 3 are grouped together as self-perception. And within that, you've got emotional self-awareness. So that's being able to understand your own feeling and their impact. The self-regard, which is respect and acceptance of your own strengths and weaknesses. And self-actualization, which is about improving yourself and pursuing meaningful objectives. Then the next 3 are grouped together as self-expression. So that's about emotional expression, expressing your feelings verbally and non-verbally. Independence, being self-directed and free from emotional dependence on others. And assertiveness, expressing feelings, beliefs, and thoughts in a socially acceptable manner. Interpersonal skills, So there we have interpersonal relationships, so develop and maintain mutually satisfying relationships. We have empathy, so that's about recognizing, understanding, appreciating the feelings of others, and social responsibility. So that's contributing to society or your social group or to welfare of others. The next block is decision making. So here we have impulse control. So that's ability to resist and delay impulses. Reality testing. So that's about being objective and seeing things as they really are. And problem solving. So that's about the ability to solve problems where emotions are involved. And the final group of 3 is stress management. So that's about flexibility, being able to adapt your feelings, your thinking, and your behavior to change. Stress tolerance, being able to effectively cope with stressful or difficult situations. And optimism. So that's about remaining hopeful and resilient despite setbacks. And you can see why splitting them into those 15 categories, that's now becoming much more granular. So we started off with the Goldman definition. So emotional intelligence is about recognizing, understanding, and managing your own emotions and emotions of others. Whereas now with this model, we've split it down into 15 very, very specific components of emotional intelligence. Okay, so now let's see how might that work out. So now imagine that you've been working very hard, you've been rotated to do a lot of nights and weekends. You've just finished a really important stint of work and it is coming up to Christmas and you're going to fly away to join your family and you've really been looking forward to that. And you arrive at the airport and it turns out that your flight was cancelled and your flight was the last flight that was going to take you to where the rest of the family are. Now, what on earth do you do with that? I'm guessing that for an awful lot of people listening, the gut reaction is going to be real anger. And some people would absolutely explode when this happens and would just go absolutely mad. So let's use that scenario and think about how emotional intelligence might apply there. Okay, so let's think of emotional self-awareness. So there I am at that check-in desk and it turns out that my flight has been cancelled. So emotional self-awareness, I would need to know what's coming up for me. You know, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm worried, I'm distressed, I'm going to miss my family, I'm not going to go to join them. So that's being aware of the emotions that are arising in you. You know, self-regard, sort of that would be about valuing myself. You know, okay, so I'm really angry. Does that make me a bad person because I'm angry? Well, you know, it's just the way the things are. Or I'm really upset. Does that make me weak because I'm really upset? You know, I'm going to cry because I'm not going to see my family. You know, that doesn't make me a bad person. So self-regard would be recognizing, well, you know, I might get upset or I might get angry, but, you know, I still value myself for who I am. And self-actualization in this context might be thinking, you know, okay, actually, you know, what's important to me? And what's important to me may be, you know, I'm a nice person. I don't want to give the person at the check-in desk a really hard time. Or what really matters to me is that I want to go home. I want to visit my family. And their self-actualization then is, you know, okay, well, that's the bigger picture. You know, I want to be able to fly. So how can I best achieve that? And clearly, if I shout at the person at the check-in desk, then they're probably not going to be anywhere near as helpful as they might be if I try and work with them, because, you know, they're probably going to be more likely to help me if I work with them. Emotional expression in that context might be that you know, yes, if I'm angry or yes, if I'm upset, that I'm willing to share that, because, you know, if I'm angry and I bottle it all up and I'm really upset, then over time the cumulative effects of bottling up emotions, you know, that's going to show, it's going to leak up somewhere else. So I can express myself and I might need to, and I guess the thing is comes back to assertiveness, and in relation to assertiveness then would be, I need to express myself, I need to express my frustration, my anger and dissatisfaction, but how I do that matters. Yeah, so it's not about bottling up emotions. You know, emotional expression is useful, but it's about doing it assertively. So that means that then how would I express those emotions in a way that is helpful, in a way that's productive, in a way that's useful, rather than in a way that is destructive. And in terms of how might independence show up in that situation, would be that yes, I'm angry, yes, I'm upset, but I don't rely on anybody else. If I'm upset, I don't rely on anybody else. I don't have to turn to anybody else to deal with that, because of course I'm upset, or of course I'm angry. But it's being able to stand on my own 2 feet, and being able to deal with those emotions in a difficult scenario. So we talked about self-perception and self-expression. Then let's move on to interpersonal skills. How would interpersonal skills play out in that scenario? So of course, if I demonstrate empathy to the person that's checking me in, and build interpersonal relationship, I'm actually much more likely to get what I need. Because if I say to them, gosh, that's really disappointing. I can imagine it must have been really tough for you as well, because you've probably been telling an awful lot of people that the flight's been cancelled, and I'm pretty sure that a lot have been angry and upset. You can see that straight away I've built a relationship and I've demonstrated empathy. And by building that relationship with the person, they're probably much more likely to be helpful. And then social responsibility also, well, there may be other people that have greater needs than me. Perhaps, my need for this flight isn't as great as somebody else's might be, or maybe I can be helpful to other people. Perhaps there's a flight going from another airport and it means catching a taxi there. And if I've got the money to pay for the taxi, then I can perhaps pay for some people that haven't got the money, and I'll take people with me because, I'm going there anyway. So how does decision making show up in that scenario? Well, impulse control, you can see how that's going to be really important, because my first impulse might be to be angry and to shout or to cry and to be really upset. But if I control that impulse and say, okay, what's the bigger picture here? You can see how that would be really helpful. Reality testing would be the next aspect of emotional intelligence. Okay, so my flight's been cancelled and I think the world has ended, but has it really? Maybe I can get to my family a day later. Perhaps I can fly from somewhere else. Maybe I can do a Zoom call. The world won't end probably if I don't meet my family. And then again, problem solving. Okay, so I have a problem here. There's really strong emotions on my part and on the part of every passenger that's there and on the part of the check-in desk person. So how can I work with emotions to solve the problem? And I've spoken about that already. So the idea here is that, if I understand and manage my emotions and I build that relationship, I'm actually probably going to get much more done. And then final component is stress management. So flexibility. So, I might be thinking, gosh, the world's ended. I'm going to be really angry, but I could be flexible with my way of thinking, which might be, gosh, this is really sad. For me, yes, it's visit to family, but, I wonder what everybody else is going through. Or can I actually go and fly from somewhere else? What else can I do? Stress tolerance, that then is about how much I'm able to absorb stress, and optimism, and in some ways they are linked. So, I can look on the positive side and deal with the stress and try and get to what needs to happen. So hopefully you can see how those 15 facets of emotional intelligence play out in that particular scenario. So you can see how it's been applied. And of course, not every facet might be relevant in every situation, but a lot of the time it's really useful to look at different facets. So that's why I like this 15 item model, because it becomes very, very granular. So how can you improve emotional intelligence? Well, the good news is I've told you that if you do nothing as you get older, it's going to get better, but there are things that you can do. And I'm going to highlight some thoughts and some ideas about what you might be able to do. So the first thing would be around mindfulness. So remember that we talked about emotional intelligence being able to recognize your own emotions. So in recognizing your own emotions means being aware of what's going on for you. And the concept of mindfulness here is really useful. I'm not talking about sitting in a darkened room. I'm not talking about the kind of mindfulness where, your hospitals might be sending you on courses that say, if only you were more mindful, then, we would have more beds, and of course, those kind of discussions. I know a lot of people find upsetting, including me. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mindfulness in its genuine format as it was intended. And mindfulness then is about awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. So paying attention specifically and not judging. So if you think of that, if you are noticing what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're doing, you can see how that will be useful, because that would help you notice what's going on with your emotions. And then related to that also is that you can notice what you're thinking, feeling and doing, and then making conscious decisions about actually how you want to do that. And mindfulness is something that you can work on. Meditation would be useful for that. So simple breath meditation, that would be useful. Activities like yoga, going for a walk and paying attention to what's going on. So I'm not going to talk about mindfulness, but mindfulness is something that you can practice. And by practicing mindfulness, you get better at noticing what's going on without you. And that helps you with emotional intelligence, because you get better at recognizing your own emotions. The other concept here that is useful is the idea of granularity of emotions. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that I've got a slide of 100 different emotions. So, we all say, I've said I've used the term angry, I've used the term sad, but actually, emotions are much more granular. Maybe in that scenario at the airport, sort of perhaps actually, maybe what it is, it's frustration, or maybe it's stress, or perhaps it's concern, because, you're worried about the fact that you're not going to make it home. So, angry is one of the emotions, but actually, maybe angry isn't the right thing. Perhaps I'm worried because I'm not going to make it home, or maybe I'm frustrated because, I've been working really hard and I've done lots of long shifts, and now the last step is that I can't make it to see my family. So granularity of emotion, giving emotion specific label, giving it a name, noticing what emotion is coming up for you and giving it a specific name. And of course, when it comes to being flexible with emotions, you can then try and convert some of the really hot, powerful emotions into something that is a little bit less intense. Yeah. So I might be, frustrated. That might be a really intense emotion, but I might sort of say, okay, how can I convert that in emotion into disappointed? Yeah. Frustrated, very intense, disappointed, a little bit less intense. And that can be a way that you can then begin to manage yourself. But it starts with noticing your emotion and, and maybe giving it a specific name. So I'll move on to how you can understand your emotions and and how you can manage them. And typically, when something happens, there's an activating event, and then there's a consequence that arises from that. So again, if I think of the airport scenario, activating event, there is the flight's been cancelled. Consequence, I'm angry or I'm upset, whatever it might be. So there's an activating event and a consequence happens. And the issue is that there's usually a belief that occurs between the activating event and the consequence that typically people are not conscious of. And this would be typical from cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral coaching. So if any of you have knowledge or experience of that, you will recognize that this is where this comes from. So again, if I think of the airport activating event, there is the flight's been cancelled. My belief is that I'm not going to see my family. My family is going to be angry. The world is going to end. Christmas is going to be ruined. And consequences then, I cry or I'm angry. But there's a belief that occurs between the activating event and the consequence. And typically we are not conscious of that belief. We don't examine it. Now, once you've examined that belief, you can then move on, and then you can sort of start to debate that belief and potentially discard it. So, the belief is I'm not going to make it home. Well, is that a fact? Well, maybe I could go from another airport, or maybe I could go by train, or maybe I could go tomorrow. And that Christmas is going to be ruined. Well, it might not be. Perhaps, I could phone my family and we could move Christmas dinner to Boxing Day, for example, if I can't get there for Christmas. So you can kind of, you can debate that belief and see whether actually, it is correct. And you can then sort of start to experiment with, with other ways of thinking, okay, so instead of thinking that that I'm not going to go home, How else can I think about that? So I can think, okay, actually, maybe that's an opportunity. I've been really busy, so perhaps what I need more than anything else, it's just a really good night's sleep, because the flight was going to be really late and I was going to arrive at my family knackered. So maybe I'll just spend the night in a hotel. I'm going to have a really good night's sleep. I'm going to fly out tomorrow. The family can move dinner to Boxing Day, and I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and we're going to still get the family get together. So all of a sudden, something that was a disaster, I was angry and upset, I've seen a different side to it. Yeah. So there's different ways that you can think about it. And I really like this idea of converting gremlins to gurus. So, a gremlin would be, I get angry or I get really upset. And I've converted that gremlin into a guru, which is actually, I'm capable to think laterally. I've fixed the issues. I've thought of different solutions. And actually, I've managed to get a really good night's sleep in the meantime. So converting gremlin to gurus. The other things that can be helpful would be logging your triggers and examining patterns that's going on. So maybe if I take that much more into workplace context, for example, so if that wherever you're really busy, then you tend to be angry. You're now starting to notice what's going on. Wherever I'm busy, I'm getting angry. Or, you can log your triggers. So, for example, that, whenever people force me to do something that I think is just wrong, that's the kind of stuff that's making me really upset and wears me out. Yeah. So you can start to log and examine patterns, or you might say whenever a particular person does something, that's the person that I always fall out with. And then you say, okay, what's going on here? Why do I always fall out with this person? Why do I always struggle with these circumstances? Why do these things always make me tired? Why does this particular thing, create really stressful emotions in me? So whatever's going on for you in workplace, you're logging triggers, you're examining patterns. And it's useful, particularly when you have really strong emotions. So, if you're really, really stressed, really, really upset, noticing those emotions, the thoughts and the body sensations. And then, of course, once you've started to identify the triggers, you've looked at patterns, you're then a long way towards trying to deal with that and getting to the stage when you can examine those things and then consciously start to choose responses. And the key things then, to summarize all of these things I've talked about, is about noticing what's going on, giving it a name, and then choosing a response. And when it comes to choosing a response, I really like this idea of the choice point. And the choice point is a reminder that no matter what happens, there is always a choice that we can make. So typically, when difficult situations, thoughts, or feelings turn up, our automatic reaction is to put us into fight or flight survival mode. Because, from evolution point of view, that was a really useful strategy. Because, if there's a noise in the bushes, if you thought that actually there's a tiger coming to eat me, that's a good survival strategy. If there's a noise in the bushes and you thought, oh, there's a person who's very attractive in there, then that's not going to be a great survival strategy. Yeah. So evolution has given us a survival strategy, which is that when difficult situations, thoughts, feelings turn up, automatically we tend to go into fight or flight mode. We get hooked onto doing away moves and we act ineffectively. We behave unlike the sort of person that we want to be. Because the reality is that most of the difficult situations, thoughts or feelings that turn up now, they are not a threat to our life. They're much more complex. Yeah. So instead of those difficult situations, thoughts, feelings, moving us away from being the kind of person that we want to be, automatically putting us into fight or flight mode, what you want to do is you want to move in a different direction. You want to act like the kind of person that you want to be. And that might not be the automatic reaction where you go, that's something that you might need to spend time developing. So being the kind of person that you want to be. And the kind of things that can help you there is, what are the consequences of the away moves? What's that costing you? So again, if I think in a workplace context, for example, if there's a person that I don't particularly like at work, and, I might not fall out with them, but I might simply say, I don't want to work with that person. I don't want to have any any interaction. What are the consequences of that? Well, okay, so maybe I'm missing out on opportunities, or perhaps patients would deserve me talking to that person and working better with that person. So I'm missing out on opportunities, perhaps is the wrong thing for the patient. And I say, actually, what matters to me? Well, I do want to be a good colleague. I do want to be a collaborator. I do want to put patients first. So whenever that person turns up or whenever they say something, rather than me walking away or refusing to engage with that person, what matters to me is, I do want to be a good colleague. I do want to put patients first. So by recognizing that if I don't interact with that person, there's going to be consequence, and what do I want to do instead? That can be a really powerful way that I can then use the idea of making conscious choices to make choices about being the kind of person that I want to be. Or if I'm really busy and really stressed at work and I have 1,001 things to do, then again, the automatic reaction might be that I say, this is all too much, I give up, I want to leave it all. I'm probably going to end up having a fallout with somebody. The next person that comes along and asks me to do something else for them, they're going to be in for a shock, because, that might just be the one thing that pushes me over the edge. But what's the consequences of all of that? I've then fallen out with another person. I've done less work because I've spent so much time worrying and stressed that actually I haven't managed to deal with any of the work. So the fact that I was stressed meant I ended up doing even less than I would have done. Whereas, what do I want to do? Well, people will ask me to do stuff. I want to be a good colleague. I want to be a nice person. And what matters, which of these jobs that I have to do, which of those matter? So maybe I spend some time prioritizing, and I kind of say, well, actually, I shouldn't be stressed, because if I'm stressed, then I'm going to do even less. So let's spend some time prioritizing, do the stuff that's really, really important. And I need to accept that I simply am not going to be able to do all of that stuff. And I need to be kind to myself, because, it's going to be really difficult when I'm stressed, when I have so many things to do. So a little bit of self-compassion and kindness is also then important. And I really like the concept of thinking, feeling, and acting as being three legs of a three-legged stool. The three of them go together. How you think influences how you feel and act. How you act influences how you think and feel, and how you feel influences how you think and act. And of course, this is common sense, because you will all know that if you are really stressed and you do some sport, you're going to feel better. You watch a movie, you're going to feel better. You go for a run, it's going to make you feel better. And the reason why I like the concept is because changing how you think and how you feel, that can be quite complex and quite difficult, but actually changing how you act, that's often much easier to do. So when things are difficult, and if you're really struggling to change how you think and how you feel, then focus on changing how you act, because changing your behavior, that can be a really useful shortcut to changing how you think and how you feel. Okay, so let's bring some of that together. So remember, we started off talking about emotional intelligence being about the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others. And then we went through a very granular 15-item model that looked at specific things. And I've given you some examples and some suggestions and some thoughts about how you can develop your emotional intelligence. So let's try and put all of that together. So when it comes to recognizing your own emotions, the key thing really that's going to help you with that is going to be the ability to catch your thinking, notice what's going on, and mindfulness is a strategy, something that can help you there. So develop mindful practice. That means you're going to get better at noticing what's going on for them. And also naming your emotions, and specifically being very granular about emotions. There's lots and lots of different emotions. Try and be specific about exactly what this emotion is, and give it a name. So noticing and naming. So let's move on then to understanding your emotions. So the key questions here are, what are my beliefs about this emotion? What does this emotion mean for me? And what behavior does this emotion lead to? And then you can use the activating event, belief, consequence, dispute, and experiment model, the ABCDE model, remembering that usually we go on automatic. There's an activating event and we go to consequences straight away, and there's a belief in the middle that we usually forget about. Yeah. So it's, there's an emotion. What do you believe about emotion? What behavior does that emotion lead to? And then when it comes to managing your own emotions, again, the ABCDE model can be helpful, because you can start to experiment with different ways of thinking and seeing what happens. Also, you can remember that emotions are data, And emotions are your allies. Emotions are your friends. Emotions are not an enemy. Emotions are data that tells you, are your needs being met? Or maybe if you're talking about relationship, are the other person's needs being met? How does this sit with my value or with their values? So emotions are giving you some information about that. And again, if you think from workplace context, if you're really worried about, being in a cardiac arrest, for example, or, you're worried about doing a particular type of procedures, and you're really stressed and you're worried, what does that tell you? Yeah. So if you're really stressed about something, then I'm guessing that emotions are telling you that this is something that matters to you. Yeah, doing a good job matters to you. Patience matter to you. Being competent matters to you. So actually, emotions are data. Yeah, if you're stressed because you've got lots of stuff to do, what does that stress tell you about the kind of person that you are, and what's important to you? Yeah, and then you can link it and you can say, well, if I'm stressed about doing a particular procedure, and that's telling me that actually, I really need to go and learn a bit more, then yes, I need to go learn a bit more. If I'm stressed about a particular procedure and that's telling me that I really value patient care, then that's a good thing. So stress is my friend, because worrying has then made me take a step back and say, do I have the skills? Am I the right person? Is this the right thing? And all of those things, then all of a sudden they become useful. And, it's less about, worry is a problem, but worry now becomes my friend. Worry is useful because it's helping me reflect and it's helping me think, is this the right thing for the patient? Remember also that a lot of the time, there are certain emotions that have to be accepted. Yes, I get angry because I can't make it home for Christmas. In that scenario, I'm going to have to accept myself as I am. That doesn't mean that I have to like being angry, or it doesn't mean that I have to like a colleague that doesn't share my values. I might have to accept that this is a person I have to work with. I might have to accept that stress and being busy and having too many things to do, that all of those things are part of the job. I might have to accept that, but accepting them, that's not the same as liking them. Yeah, I don't have to like it, but I have to accept that that's just the way that things are. And the other two aspects of managing emotions, one is the think, feel, and act. Remember that acting is usually a shortcut. Changing your behavior is a shortcut. And then the idea of choosing your emotions. The automatic reaction might be taking you into survival mode, which isn't really what you want. And having a choice when it comes to difficult emotions, you have a choice as to how you want to behave and how you want to act. And remember that knowing what's the bigger picture, what matters to you, what are the choices of acting in a different way, those kind of questions can help you deal with that. So thank you very much for listening. Remember, we talked about emotional intelligence as being able to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions and the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence is a really useful skill to have in the workplace, and it's something that's well worth developing. I mentioned right at the beginning that it isn't just about how much you have, but it's about balancing. And if I go back over some of the examples that I've given, so if you think assertiveness and anger, they need to be balanced, because it might be great that I'm very assertive and I'm very capable of expressing my own emotions. But if that isn't balanced with sufficient empathy, then it becomes problematic. Because, in the airport scenario, I'm really good at expressing myself. I'm very assertive. I make it very clear that I'm angry. But if I've not demonstrated any empathy for the person in front of me, it's going to go nowhere. And again, if I think in a workplace context, if you're really busy and there's a job that you need to do and you're very forceful in putting your point across and making the case for what you want, but the person that's on the other end is really stressed and you've not demonstrated any empathy for them, that's going to be really difficult. Or, so to say that you're requesting a test for somebody and the waiting time is really long. Again, if you lack social justice, if you lack if you lack the ability to see how your request sits into the overall hospital function, that's also going to be problematic, because you're very assertive and you're very capable of making the case for what you want. but you were incapable of recognizing how your request sits in the grand scheme of things, how your request sits in with everybody else's priority. So it becomes problematic. Equally, if you're really, really empathetic and you understand other people's emotions and you really engage with them, you're giving everybody all the time, but you're not very good at expressing your own emotions, that might mean that you're not very good at asking for help. So all the time you spend your time offering help to others, doing help for others, being a listener for other people. But if you're really good at empathy, but you're not very good at expressing your own emotions, then that's problematic, because actually you never get to fill your glass, because all the time you're giving yourself to other people, but you never ask for help back. And that's not going to be a sustainable strategy in the long term, because you need to fill your glass as well. So developing emotional intelligence overall is useful, and developing specific elements is useful, but also remember that what's important is balancing the different facets of it. It all needs to be in proportion to everything else. So more isn't necessarily better. So I hope that was useful, and I hope that the concepts that I've introduced and some of the tools that I've given you will help you succeed and thrive and work. Thank you very much.